Now we need your help again as we go out today. God bless us. Let us capture our fugitives. Keep us safe. We go home to our babies. In Jesus' name, let us help make Hawaii proud.
But we're talking about not just a wife or a partner, but someone who was your soulmate and also was a driving force in all this. You guys built something that is an American original.
Thank you.
But you built it together.
Yes.
The cameras made the Chapman family look almost unbreakable. They chased fugitives together, built businesses together, and turned their family life into one of cable television's biggest reality shows. But while millions of people were watching, some of the most important chapters were happening completely out of frame. The patriarch has been on the wrong side of the law himself, and so have many of his people. And that's apart from the losses this family has absorbed since the cameras stopped rolling. So what actually happened to the Dog the Bounty Hunter cast? And what stories did fans miss? Join us as we uncover what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Duane Chapman, the bounty hunter who became a fugitive. There's something most fans never clocked while the show was airing. The man catching fugitives for a living spent nearly a full year as a fugitive himself, and it happened because of the very capture that made him a star. In 2003, Duane Chapman tracked down Andrew Luster, an heir to the Max Factor Cosmetics fortune, after Luster skipped bail on a sexual misconduct trial and fled to Mexico. Duane cornered him in Puerto Vallarta, and that single capture is what got Duane a television deal in the first place. What most viewers never realized is that bounty hunting is illegal under Mexican law, and that fact came back around 3 years later in a way nobody saw coming. By September 2006, the show was 2 seasons deep and pulling in millions of weekly viewers. That's when the Mexican government formally asked the United States to arrest Duane on its behalf for the Luster capture. U.S. Marshals showed up at his Hawaii property and took him into custody, along with his son Leland and his longtime partner Tim Chapman, on charges of illegal detention and conspiracy. A judge set bail at $300,000 for Duane and $100,000 apiece for Leland and Tim. All 3 walked out wearing ankle monitors, barred from leaving the country. Duane, never one to stay quiet, told reporters outside the courthouse, ankles shackled, wearing a blue muscle shirt, that the U.S. government was jealous of how good he was at his job. It took almost a year to resolve. By August 2007, a Mexican court had dismissed the charges against all 3 men entirely. But for nearly 12 months, the star of a show built entirely around chasing down people who'd skipped bail was himself wearing a monitor and waiting on a judge's ruling. Most fans who watched the show during its original run had no idea this was happening in the background the whole time. But the Mexico arrest was not the first time Duane found himself on the opposite side of the law. In 1976, he was present during a robbery in Texas that ended with his companion fatally harming another man. Duane wasn't the one who did it, but Texas law didn't require that distinction. He was convicted of first-degree murder as an accessory, sentenced to 5 years, and ultimately served 18 months before being paroled. That conviction never got airtime on Dog the Bounty Hunter, but it followed him well past his release. It's the reason he isn't legally allowed to own a firearm, and it's also why he's been denied entry into the United Kingdom on separate occasions. For 8 seasons, audiences watched a man track down people who'd missed their court dates, never realizing he was doing that job as a convicted felon himself, carrying restrictions that most bounty hunters on television never have to think about. It's one of the more overlooked facts about the man whose name is on the show. Today, Duane is still bounty hunting, though the days of his massive television spotlight are long behind him. But Duane wasn't the only one who ended up on the other side of the law. The two arrests that never made the highlight.
One of the stars of the reality TV show Dog the Bounty Hunter was arrested today on suspicion of attempted murder and indecent exposure. Marissa Yamane joins us with more. Marissa?
Joe, Tim Chapman, who works alongside Duane "Dog" Chapman as a bounty hunter, turned himself into Honolulu police this afternoon. The arrest stems from an incident last night in an Ala Moana parking lot.
Tim Chapman, better known to fans as Youngblood, spent the first 5 seasons of the show as one of Duane's closest partners in the field. Because they share a last name, many people assumed they were related. And when Duane started calling him his blood brother, all doubts seemed to disappear as many took it as confirmation. They were wrong. The two aren't related at all. There's a 2-season stretch of the show where Tim simply vanished from the cast, and the reason behind it rarely comes up in retrospectives. In January 2008, he was arrested in Honolulu and charged with first-degree terroristic threatening and indecent exposure after officers responded to a report of a man exposing himself in a vehicle parked outside a shopping center. Tim stepped away from the show for what became a 2-season hiatus. The charges were eventually dropped, and Tim returned in 2010 to finish out the series before walking away from bounty hunting for good. These days, he keeps a low profile, largely out of the spotlight, and most fans who remember him fondly from the early seasons have no idea this happened at all. Lisa Chapman, Duane's daughter, and one of the most recognizable faces from the show's later seasons, has an arrest of her own that gets even less attention. Just like Tim, Lisa was also arrested in Honolulu in January 2020 and charged with 2 counts of harassment. TMZ reported that the alleged victims were a man and a woman, including someone identified as Lisa's girlfriend at the time. She was also initially booked on a resisting arrest charge, though that particular charge was ultimately dropped. Lisa was released on $600 bail and appeared in court about a month later. Although neither Tim nor Lisa ended up serving real time behind bars, their arrests are part of the same pattern that runs through this entire show's history, flowing from Duane's own encounter. People who spent years enforcing the law on camera somehow finding themselves on the other side of it. Presently, Lisa is still active in business and occasionally sharing glimpses of her life online. And then there's someone fans thought was family, but wasn't even close. Justin Bihag, the nephew who wasn't family.
It's just, I know I was set up. I know things were done to make them obviously a lot of money. I know money was made. A lot of bullcrap was sold. I lost my freedom, man. Lost seeing my daughters. I'm a great father. I gave my heart and soul to them.
Ask a longtime fan who Justin Bihag is, and the answer is almost always the same: Dog's nephew. But that answer is wrong, and it's been wrong since the day the show first introduced him that way. Justin isn't related to Duane by blood at all. He's the son of Moon Angel, who spent years working as a close friend and assistant to both Duane and his wife, Beth. The show never corrected the record on screen, and the label stuck hard enough that even some longtime viewers only learned the truth years after the series ended. Justin appeared across 4 seasons of the original run. By his own account, he was never placed under a formal contract the way some of the other cast members were. Instead, he says he was paid in irregular lump sums, sometimes around $10,000 at a time, whenever the family decided to compensate him for an appearance. It was an arrangement built on loyalty and proximity rather than paperwork, which meant Justin's place in the family was always a little less secure than it looked on screen. Off camera, Justin was also dealing with addiction, a struggle the show never captured in any meaningful way. And that struggle became central to what happened next. Things started to unravel in December 2019 and January 2020, in the months right after the death of one of the biggest stars on the show. Justin and his mother moved in with Duane to help him through his grief, and the arrangement didn't sit well with Lissa at all. A public feud broke out between the two of them on social media, and it escalated very quickly. According to TMZ, Lissa learned through a third party that Justin appeared to be violating a protective order that barred him from using drugs or alcohol, and she reported it to police herself. When officers went to the home in Edgewater, Colorado, they reportedly found signs of both alcohol and marijuana use. Justin was arrested on suspicion of violating that order. For years, most coverage of Justin's story stopped right there, with him bonding out of jail shortly after the 2020 arrest. Very few outlets ever followed up on what actually happened to him after that, which means most fans have no idea the story didn't end in a bail hearing. In a 2025 interview with Radar Online, Justin revealed that the fallout from that arrest eventually put him behind bars for a real stretch of time, and that he'd only just been released at the end of that November. He described the experience as hell, and he didn't hold back about who he blamed for it. Justin claims Duane and Lissa did more than simply report a violation. He believes they orchestrated the entire situation to push him out of the picture, partly because his presence complicated the family's public image while they were rebuilding their brand after Beth's death. He also accused Duane of submitting a victim impact statement filled with what he called fabricated claims, while Justin was still locked up. Duane and Lissa didn't let the accusation sit unanswered. In a joint letter responding to the interview, they called Justin's statements unsubstantiated and categorically false. They plainly stated that his legal troubles were the result of his own actions, not anything the family engineered. Today, Justin is out of prison and trying to rebuild his life after years of legal and personal struggles, though his relationship with the Chapman family remains fractured. But some of the biggest stories had nothing to do with arrests. David Robinson, an unexpected death.
David Robinson, star of Dog the Bounty Hunter series Dogs Most Wanted, has died. David's wife Brooke confirms the news on Facebook. She shares this image, which features photos of the couple and their family. A statement on the tribute.
Most casual fans of the original series never learned this next name at all, because the man behind it never chased a spotlight, and the show that finally gave him one only lasted a single season. David Robinson had already been working alongside Duane Chapman for close to a decade before most viewers ever heard of him. It wasn't until Dogs Most Wanted premiered on WGN America in 2019 that he got any real screen time, introduced as Duane's right-hand man, the person responsible for the tech side of tracking fugitives down, the databases, the surveillance tools, and all the unglamorous groundwork that made the on-camera chases possible in the first place. He wasn't in it for recognition. By the time the cameras found him, he'd already spent years doing the job well without any of the attention, and the show felt less like a launch than a long overdue acknowledgement. On November 30, 2020, that changed in an instant. David was on a work call at his own dining table when he collapsed without warning. His wife, Brooke, later told TMZ that he had seemed completely healthy right up until the moment it happened. Paramedics arrived and attempted life-saving measures, but nothing worked. He died at 50, at home, with Brooke beside him. His cause of death stayed unconfirmed for weeks, which left plenty of room for rumor. Some assumed a heart attack. Others guessed a stroke, but nothing was official. Toward the end of December, Brooke shared the results of his autopsy with TMZ, and the answer turned out to be critical coronary artery disease, a serious blockage in the arteries feeding the heart. It's a condition that can build up with almost no warning signs, which is part of why his death hit the people close to him as such a shock. Duane released a statement afterward calling David his right-hand man of many years and saying he was shocked and saddened by how sudden it was. David's ex-wife, Rainey, who had also appeared on Dogs Most Wanted, posted her own tribute on Instagram. marking both his birthday and the anniversary of his death in the same caption. Because his time on screen was so brief, David's death barely registered outside the show's most dedicated fan base, even though he'd spent nearly 10 years shaping how the operation behind the show actually worked. The cameras didn't capture David's story, but there's a far more painful story that fans didn't know about, and it almost ruined everything. Barbara Chapman, the wedding tragedy. There's a hidden detail in the third season's wedding episode that has a huge emotional weight but never quite gets explained on screen. That's because what the family was actually dealing with that day never made it into the broadcast. Barbara Chapman wasn't a bounty hunter on the show the way Beth or Duane's sons were, but as one of Dog's 12 children, she was still part of the extended family audiences came to recognize through the series. On May 19, 2006, she and her boyfriend, Scott, were driving back toward Fairbanks, Alaska, from the Chena Hot Springs Resort when their vehicle left the roadway, hit an embankment, launched into the air, rolled, and landed upside down among the trees. There were no skid marks and no sign they'd tried to brake before leaving the pavement. Troopers said at the time that both drugs and alcohol were suspected factors, though that was never confirmed through toxicology results made public. Neither Barbara nor Scott survived. There's one part of this story that made it even harder for the family to bear. According to state troopers, the vehicle the couple had been driving was stolen, and they may have used a stolen credit card to try to book a hotel room shortly before the crash. Barbara's mother, Lisa Green, told a local reporter afterward that her daughter had gotten herself into a terrible mess and had been trying to turn her life around. Duane learned about his daughter's death on the morning of his own wedding. He consulted with the minister officiating the ceremony, and his 10 surviving children voted, alongside the minister, on whether the wedding should still go ahead. They decided it should. Duane and Beth were married that day in Kona, and he told the guests what had happened rather than postpone the celebration, choosing to honor Barbara's memory in the moment instead. Because that wedding was filmed and later aired as part of the show's third season, Barbara's death became permanently tied to one of the series' most emotional episodes, even though it happened entirely off camera, and viewers were never told the full story behind it. Barbara left behind a young son, Travis, who was 4 years old at the time. Her older sister, Baby Lisa Chapman, has posted a tribute to her nearly every year since on the anniversary of the crash, often mentioning how she's tried to help raise Travis in her sister's absence and keep Barbara's memory part of his life as he's grown up. But the loss that truly reshaped the family was still to come. Beth Chapman, the woman who made the show work.
Iris, thank you. Quite some sad news to report. Beth Chapman, the bail bondswoman who starred on the reality show Dog the Bounty Hunter, has died after her fight with cancer, just 51 years old. She starred on the show with her husband, Duane "Dog" Chapman.
Everyone remembers that Beth Chapman died. Fewer people remember how much of her final 2 years was actually caught on camera, and how deliberate that choice was on her part. If one person from this cast became just as recognizable as Duane himself, it was Beth. She ran the family's bail bonds business alongside raising a blended household of children from both her and Duane's prior relationships, and she earned real standing in the bail industry, eventually serving as president of the Professional Bail Agents of the United States. On screen, she was usually the one talking a cornered fugitive into surrendering peacefully. That standing is part of why her diagnosis hit as hard as it did for the people around her. In September 2017, Beth was diagnosed with throat cancer. Doctors removed a tumor, and for a while, she was told she was cancer-free. Then, in November 2018, the cancer returned, this time as stage 4 lung cancer, and it wasn't the kind of thing surgery could fix. Her daughter Bonnie later said Beth tried 1 round of chemotherapy, found the side effects too difficult to continue through, and chose to stop rather than lose the parts of herself she wanted to hold on to for whatever time she had left. Many people would have disappeared from public view at that point. Beth didn't. While she was fighting, she kept filming, first for a 2-hour special called Dog and Beth Fight of Their Lives, and later for the spin-off series Dogs Most Wanted, which followed her through chemotherapy alongside the bounty hunts. According to her family, she wanted people to see the whole picture, not just the version of her that used to chase people down for a living. Less than a year later, she was spending most of her time at Queens Medical Center in Honolulu. On June 26, 2019, Beth Chapman died at 51. A family spokeswoman said she'd been placed in a medically induced coma just days earlier after collapsing at home and having trouble breathing. Duane posted about her death within hours, writing that it was the exact time of morning Beth would normally wake up to go hiking, and that instead, she hiked the stairway to heaven. What made her death land even harder for longtime viewers is that it came 7 years after the original series had already ended. People who'd grown up watching Beth on cable reruns were, in a lot of cases, learning about her cancer and her death within the same news cycle. It wasn't a slow goodbye playing out on screen the way it had for the family in real time. For most fans, it was simply sudden. Beth's death completely reshaped the family dynamic that had defined the show for nearly a decade. Her absence is still deeply felt by the Chapman family, but her influence hasn't disappeared with her. She remains one of the most recognizable figures in the franchise, remembered for her personality both on and off the cameras. Her story, like so many others in this family, shows that there was always far more happening behind the scenes than the show ever revealed. Which revelation caught you completely off guard? And which cast member had the biggest change after the cameras stopped rolling? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.